Now, the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller suggests that there are nearly 1 million informal businesses in townships, roughly translating to nearly 40 businesses per 1,000 people. Investec believes an estimated 17% of South Africa's total employment is through the informal economy. About 2.6 million people work in the informal sector, which contributes over 5.2% to the country's GDP, or about 600 million rands. Opponents believe the township economy is a potent force for growth. Joining us now to discuss the future of the township economy are Saki Zamxaka, CEO of the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, as well as Standard Bank South Africa Head of Enterprise Development, Naledzani Mosomane. Good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight here on In Focus. Let's start with you, Naledzani. I mean, when we are talking those 30 to 40 businesses per 1,000 people in the townships, what type of business are we talking about, and what is the sustainability or even the lifespan of those businesses?
Thank you so much, Thabo. I think in terms of types of businesses, you really find a variety of businesses that are operating within your township economies. So you have your grocery stores, what we would probably call your spaza shops, but you also have those that provide personal care services. So you have your hairdressers, you have your makeup artists. Then you also have what we would call those that offer repairs and maintenance services. So you'd find your plumbers, your mechanics, your electricians. And then obviously we know the township environment, the entertainment is quite a big thing there. So you find different types of businesses that are offering entertainment services, whether it's your chisanyamas, your restaurants. There's quite a wide variety in terms of the type of businesses that operate within this township economy.
Yeah. Dr. Zamxaka, do we have a plan for these businesses and how to support them, and is that plan prioritized?
Good evening, Thabo and Naledzani. Yes, and I think maybe to add on what Naledzani said, there's actually potentially a misunderstanding of even the kind of economic activity that happens in townships. It's often called informal because, again, things we don't understand, we either call informal or emerging, but there's quite a lot of activity. I mean, even from a property point of view, people are renting their back rooms. There is some sort of manufacturing that's happening. People are making furniture and doing many other things which they sell into the market. So a bit of what we're doing now is that there is an act that's come into law that's trying to designate areas into townships so that incentives can go into them. But of course, from us as the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller is to look at what support we can give to those businesses, whether it's financial or some sort of business development support. So plan, yes, indeed there is, because there is a lot of growth capacity and growth potential in the townships.
Yeah. And in terms of your understanding then of where those businesses are in terms of development, but also in terms of the support that they need, what kind of measures are you thinking about?
So there's quite a number of things that are being looked at. So the first one is providing some sort of market access, because scale is always important. So the provincial government is looking at how some of what it procures can be then procured in some of the designated areas. So this would then drive the businesses in the townships to grow, but also hopefully drive investment from corporates even into the townships. So that's one of the things that's being done. The other one, of course, you need infrastructure, let's say bulk services. If you had somebody who has a four-roomed house and they now suddenly have 10 people, it puts pressure on infrastructure. So services need to come into it, whether it's water and sanitation, electricity, and many other things, because then that's what's going to allow a lot of things to happen. So there's some policy instruments, but market access and then funding, because also funding those businesses which have historically been perceived as being risky, or the market size is actually not quite understood. So traditional funders may then not have the appetite for it. So there's a lot of funding that's been put to it. We set up a fund between Gauteng Enterprise Propeller and the ITC which is focusing on the township. We call it Township Economic Development Fund. It's a 400 million rand fund.
Naledzani, the potential of the township economy, is this particularly bankable? Is it being banked? Is it being prioritized, particularly if you look at that retail and the telecom sectors?
It is bankable, but the challenge is that it is unbanked. And I think there's a lot of opportunity within the township economy. There's a lot of individuals or citizens that live within these economies, and they require different type of services. So we do know there's a lot of money that's flowing within the economy, but we do know that from a financial perspective, we really haven't been able to tap into that economy. And it's for a variety of reasons. I mean, we do find that a lot of the challenges with businesses that are operating within the township economy is the lack of formalization. And when you do come to a bank looking for financial support, we do look at certain information in terms of, do you have financial records? Are you compliant from a CIPC perspective if you registered? Do you have your triple BEE certificate? If you're in an industry where you're required to be licensed or certified, do you have that documentation? All of those things ultimately impact, from a banking perspective, our ability to fund businesses. So if we can work on those pieces in terms of providing these businesses with skills, the formalization piece, it really helps us from a banking perspective to really support these businesses much better.
Yeah. If you speak mostly to the owners of these businesses, will tell you that financial institutions are not coming on board. They're not playing their part. So how do you set them up on a growth path that is taking into consideration, some of their immediate challenges? Because some of them, as you put it, they are literally selling from hand to mouth, and maybe there is not even a system of record keeping.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is a lack of knowledge, Thabo, in terms of the resources that the banks actually have to support businesses, particularly businesses that are located within these township economies. So I run a division called Enterprise Development, which focuses specifically on Black-owned businesses across the country. And we provide a lot of support to these businesses. We provide businesses with access to funding in the form of what we call interest-free loans or in the form of grants. We provide these businesses with purchase order funding. And we also provide these businesses with business advisory services. So the biggest thing is that lack of knowledge. But if you, as a business, whether you're a township business or a rural business, approach us as a bank, we are able to direct you to the right different departments within the bank that can help support your business. So the support is definitely there. I think the biggest thing for me is the lack of knowledge in terms of the type of support that these businesses could benefit from.
Yeah. Zamxaka, one of the other issues that is being noted, and we tend to celebrate these grocery and food stores, large formal sectors coming into the township and beginning to trade there. We say, well, it's a good thing. People don't have to drive out anymore to towns, for example, to gain access to these huge supermarket chains. But is that in any way posing a challenge for the township economy? Or is there a way of incorporating that particular township economy within those formal sectors?
Well, Thabo, I mean, of course, from where I sit, which is where our duty is to support more of the small businesses, the ideal situation would be where, township businesses are not displaced by corporates who are coming into those spaces but develop, because we want the economy to diversify, to be a lot more inclusive. But also we know that, once you have too much concentration in a market, it starts leading to anti-competitive behaviors, and we've seen this historically. And I think a lot of corporates, take a bit of shortcut in implementing their enterprise supply development. And I think Naledzani is in that unit, because the idea with those funds is that they must then do the things that would ordinarily not happen. So you don't want banks to use their ESG program, to prop up their own products. You want them to use it to really create real development in the market. And it's not just banks. I mean, all corporates which are listed, including state-owned companies, are supposed to contribute to enterprise and supply development. And that's where a lot of growth is going to come. That is going to create employment, but also hopefully bring diversity into the market. I mean, we saw with COVID, as people are working more and more from home, that there's a lot more services people can offer, and a lot of ways in which people can create employment. And this cuts across not just in townships, but I think particularly in townships, we want to see the corporates planting a seed that grows those businesses than to displace them.
Take a break. We'll continue in a moment. Wrap up the conversation with our guests tonight. We've got Saki Zamxaka, Chief Executive Officer at the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, as well as Naledzani Mosomane, Head of Enterprise Development at Standard Bank South Africa. We're looking at the township economy. Back tonight on In Focus, and the conversation is on the township economy. Saki Zamxaka, Chief Executive Officer at the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, as well as Naledzani Mosomane, Head of Enterprise Development at Standard Bank South Africa. The other question, Dr. Zamxaka, is you mentioned market concentration, and I'm immediately thinking, growing up, you would find, for example, 5 spaza shops within a block of 10 houses, right? Where they would probably all be selling the same kind of product and competing with one another. How do you come into that space as the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, in particularly assisting those businesses to segment themselves and to target a different audience, but also to better market themselves?
So what we do on what I call business development support, or at least as we call it, there is marketing support that can be given at times, maybe business plans, which can help you do feasibility on doing other products or contributing, towards maybe some capital equipment needed for growth, but most importantly then debt which you can use to expand your business. But for me, I mean, one of the things, as I keep saying, we call these sectors informal, but they've had a way of being very competitive and almost like self-regulating. Let's say the taxi industry is one such example, where there's a big value chain where you want the taxi industry to participate in. I mean, taxi ranks, there's potential of retail. Retail already happens, but it's not always accounted for. So maybe the spaces need to look a little bit better. Wholesaling to them needs to be done. So ours is mainly to support the activity than to try and direct it, because those businesses won't exist if there isn't a demand. And I think a lot of them, because they were very small, they were able to offer the kind of convenience that you need. Because let's say now, I mean, most of the malls or shopping centers close at a certain time, but the spazas would probably open until a bit late, or they open early in the morning, and people feel a bit safe. You can send your child because it's 100, 200 meters away to go and buy bread and come back. So there's a little bit of convenience that has traditionally been around those kinds of businesses. So you want to harness that, but at least allow them scale where there is potential for them to grow and diversify to other products and services that they're able to do it.
Yeah. Naledzani, you mentioned education. Is that the only missing link you think that is required to be able to grow these businesses, or get them at least on a higher growth path, or is there something else that it needs to be prioritized?
So I think education is one important factor. I think another important factor is the access to networks. That really helps these businesses. So the coaching and the mentorship, if they can identify coaches, identify people that, whether they're in the same industry or different industry, that can mentor them, it really creates an opportunity for them to get access to new markets and access to new opportunities. So I think that's a critical component. And then what will always be a big component is the funding piece. And that really does come with these businesses being able to show that they are able to generate profits from their business. They're able to to meet a specific customer demand or a customer need, and they're able to conduct their finances, whether it's personal finances and business finances, appropriately, so that when they approach the bank, they're able to get the necessary funding or support that they require.
Yeah. What are the opportunities in the digital economy, and is there an uptake of those opportunities and maybe even solutions within the township economy?
I think the impact of COVID-19 has really forced businesses to become more innovative and to become more digital and to look at ways of improving their operations digitally, marketing their businesses digitally. So we know that SMEs are looking at different ways, whether it's marketing via social media, creating those websites. And from a bank perspective, we're looking at how do we support these businesses with those beyond banking services. We have our product, which is Simply Blue, which is actually a digital website builder. As a client, as a customer, you can get the app, the Simply Blue product, and you're able to create that digital footprint that helps you get those access to markets. And I think also the type of businesses that are operating within these township economies, we're seeing a lot of youth enterprises operating, and they're more it's easier for them to start using these digital tools to really help grow and scale their businesses.
Right. And how do we then continue to bridge the gap? You know, we are puzzled by this thing of growth in the economy, and we know that once we get this economy growing at a particular percentage, it will begin to employ people, and people will be a little bit more stable, and the social instability we're seeing will be addressed. Where do we begin to build that bridge right now? Because, I mean, at the government level, they're talking about reforms, but it's at a very high level. I don't think people on the ground really understand how those reforms are going to benefit them, or maybe we need reforms that are particularly directed at that township economy.
Yeah, I think even beyond the government piece, it's what we as the citizens who live in these township economies are doing to support these township businesses. Are we buying from the businesses that are located within our environment? Are we paying these businesses on time? Because that's really a critical component. Are we having, whether it's corporate functions, are we going to these townships to really help support these businesses? So for me, I think we as citizens, we can rely on government, and government will make sure that they keep on creating different type of initiatives to help these businesses. But as individuals that live within the communities that live within these township communities, it's really important that we start by supporting these businesses.
Yeah. Tax regime, Saki Zamxaka, is probably one of those issues that we need to also maybe look at. Many of these businesses that are operating in the township simply and below the income tax threshold. How do we approach that particular aspect?
Okay, so two things, Thabo, for me. I mean, I think the first one maybe to make a comment on is the digital economy. One of the things that's interesting again about townships is that's where the biggest potential for digital services is, because we know that South Africa, I mean, not just South Africa, most of the continent is still young. People who are younger than 35, and a lot of them are concentrated in townships and the rural areas. So if there's going to be any growth in digital services, a lot of it is going to have to be in the townships. And there's a lot of investment in infrastructure, fiber, and all of that that's going into the townships in recognition of the fact that there is a big growth potential. Now on tax, again for me it's an interesting one, because who are you trying to incentivize? Because if you look at tax thresholds, a lot of the smaller businesses are not really yet at a point where they are either VAT vendors because of their turnover, or even in terms of income tax, it's not going to benefit them much. So in certain occasions, you may in actuality be incentivizing big corporates to displace businesses with a tax incentive. But again, yes, you may want to give certain kinds of incentives to a business and say, you in a township, because there's a challenge in infrastructure, if you put yourself off the grid or you are economical with the use of services, we'll give you certain credit. So I think the the tax incentives have got to be clear that they are creating the right incentive, and they don't, by definition, get those big businesses who are big taxpayers to get a relief by going into what is a growth market. Because I think generally, I mean, if you look at township malls and some of the rural and smaller malls, they've generally been growing better than those that have been in the traditional suburbs and big areas. So it's a growth market which has its own challenges and understanding, but I think it needs to be treated more on a commercial basis than always, they need help. And what help they need is access to finance that they would not get. So there's a lot of transacting that happens, and many institutions are happy to provide transacting services. But when now people need more than that, they need finance, they need, then that's where then the problems start happening.
Right.
And we're seeing also creativity where people are saying, okay, you may not be having an accountant that does your books because you're too small, but will give you a financial product which, at the end of the month basically does your income statement. And then others are then able to say, based on the transactions that come into your banking account, we can then give you this facility, and we will, deduct payments on a daily basis or even monthly, but the security being the cash that's in the account. So I think there's a little bit of innovation that can be done, which is not based on just the assumption that all that these businesses need to grow are handouts, but, to get them structured like anybody else and get access to, funding instruments that are going to let them grow in an organic way.
I appreciate your interventions and contribution to the conversation tonight. That's Naledzani as well as Saki there helping us in that conversation.